Yu-Gi-Oh! Has had many great games over the years, and some not so great. But of all the games, I would have never expected one of my personal favorites to be one that is not actually dueling with cards. Yu-Gi-Oh! Capsule Monster Coliseum released in 2004 on the PlayStation 2, and it was generally reviewed pretty well. The premise is classic Yu-Gi-Oh! You play as Yugi and you face off against others in a tournament, dueling a bunch of characters from the show. The goal is simple: win the tournament. Only instead of dueling with cards, you are dueling with capsule monsters. Something I find personally hilarious is that at the beginning of a match, Yugi will say it's time to start instead of it's time to duel, and it does not quite have that same emphasis.
It's time to start!
So what's the gameplay like? Well, it is more akin to chess rather than playing cards, with each capsule monster having specific ways to move and attack others on the board, with some extra abilities as well. Before each round, you select which monsters you want to use. However, there is a monster point limit, also known as an MP limit. Since each capsule monster requires a certain amount of MP, there is a limit to the number of monsters you can select from. Each round, you are given a certain amount of points to spend, known as AP. You can use AP to summon the monsters, move them, or attack with them. Fighting and playing monsters are generally treated the same way as the card game, with more powerful monsters requiring more points in order to use. There are special abilities some monsters can use, such as AoE attacks, and there are elemental advantages and disadvantages as well. Additionally, levels can have certain gimmicks that change how the level is played, like introducing hazards or changing the entire map and how it's traversed. Each capsule monster has their own health, known as PP, and when it's depleted, that monster is destroyed. These capsule monsters can also level up by defeating other monsters or winning games, allowing them to become stronger. Similarly, you have a crystal you must protect, and at the beginning of the game you choose what element you want it to be. You win by defeating the enemy's crystal and lose if yours is destroyed. Alternatively, you can also win by defeating all of the enemy's monsters on the field. As you play through the game, you can get more monsters, exploring more options and finding other strategies that work for you. This is important because the game can be challenging at many points and does often require specific strategies depending on the level. Ultimately, this all amounts to gameplay that is interesting, strategic, and most importantly, fun. Moving on from gameplay, this game also has great art direction. Each level of play is incredibly unique and often reflects the opponents you are facing at the time. All the monsters are faithfully recreated from the show and other games as well. There are even higher budget scenes of monsters attacking if you want to see it. As a side note, these scenes are pretty, but they're also extremely long, giving it's just one attack. On average, each scene is about 10 seconds long. Since you normally attack one monster more than once, it would mean that these long scenes would play repeatedly. One match could last 3 to 4 times longer than it would otherwise, with the scenes turned off. As nice as they are, it's insane to keep these on the whole time. Anyway, let's talk story. As previously mentioned, you play as Yugi, specifically Yami Yugi, and face off against competitors who are all familiar if you've watched the show. The story is a pretty good length, taking between 12 to 15 hours to complete depending on the player. So what are you trying to accomplish? Well, the goal is simple: win the tournament. As you progress through the game, there is some banter between Yugi and the opponent before and after each match. Now I know what you're wondering, does Yu-Gi-Oh! Capsule Monster Coliseum rival The Last of Us in its storytelling prowess? Surprisingly, no it does not. This banter is all there is to the story. Just win the tournament and win the game, with some occasional lines of dialogue in between. That's it. There is really no story. You go from one tournament area to the next until the final area is unlocked. After defeating the others in this area, your final opponent is of course Kaiba, who has a stupid amount of blue eyes white dragons because it's, well, Kaiba.
It's not fair!
If you win, congratulations, you're the king of capsule monsters. And then that's it. Now there is replayability to a certain extent. Once finished, you can begin a new playthrough with all your current monsters and stats. However, the only real reason to do this is to get monsters you may have missed or evolve them into more powerful monsters. These new evolved monsters do have new movement and attack patterns as well. Additionally, like many great PS2 games, this game also had an option to have a second player join the game. Each player could customize their deck and face off against each other, with customization options for the maps, MP and AP limits, etc. Of course, the second player had to be connected to the same PS2 with another controller, but it was really fun fun, especially in 2004 with a lack of internet options for console games, and it provided more replayability. But ultimately, that is about it, aside from simply playing the game again for the fun of it. Looking back, I do wish that they scaled the game to be more difficult on a New Game Plus. That would have been amazing. Unfortunately, that idea was never put in. But, moving on to a more positive topic, I would like to highlight the really good music in this game. Each level has their own unique tracks that play, and most of the time represents the current level quite well. When a level's landscape changes entirely, the music changes with it to play a new track. This all provides a tremendous atmosphere to the levels. Additionally, the tracks that play before and after matches are fun to listen to as well. Along the same lines as music, the sound design in this game is great. The various sound effects used are extremely satisfying. For example, hitting or destroying an enemy monster, placing capsules at the start of a match, the special ability sound effects, and even moving monsters around the field are so pleasing to hear. When it comes to music and sounds, this game excels. To conclude, this is not a perfect game. The story is non-existent, and it's missing some features that would make it more replayable. However, I still think it's a really fun game to go through. Is this the best Yu-Gi-Oh game? No. But even so, it's still one of my personal favorite Yu-Gi-Oh titles. To me, it's relaxing, fun, and quite nostalgic. Heck, after making this, I want to go through it again. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.